There is a document in the King County Courthouse in Seattle, Washington. It is a commitment order dated January 19, 1944. It authorizes the involuntary psychiatric commitment of Frances Elena Farmer to Western State Hospital in Steilacoom, Washington. The document lists the reasons for commitment: uncooperative, difficult to manage, refuses to comply with instructions. These are not psychiatric symptoms. These are descriptions of a woman who said no. Frances Farmer said no to the studio that owned her contract. She said no to the publicity department that managed her image. She said no to the executives who told her what to wear and who to date and how to behave in public. She said no to her mother, who had been feeding information about her daughter to the studio and to the press for years. In Hollywood in 1944, a woman who said no was not difficult. She was crazy. And if she was crazy, she could be put somewhere that saying no was no longer an option. That is exactly what happened to Frances Farmer. And it took 20 years for anyone to say it out loud. Frances Elena Farmer was born on September 19, 1913, in Seattle, Washington. Her father, Ernest, was a lawyer. Her mother, Lillian, was a woman whose ambitions had been disappointed by her own life and who had redirected them entirely toward her daughter. Frances was the youngest of 3 children. She was intellectually exceptional from the time she was small. She read voraciously. She argued with her teachers. She had opinions that she expressed without editing for the comfort of the people around her. At 17, she won a national essay contest. The essay was titled "God Dies." It was an argument against the existence of God based on the problem of suffering. Seattle was a conservative city in 1930. The response to the essay was significant. Death threats were sent to the school. The newspaper ran letters condemning the teenager who had written it. Frances Farmer published a response to the criticism. The response was measured, reasoned, and completely unafraid. She was 17 years old. At the University of Washington, she studied drama. She was genuinely talented in a way that her professors found difficult to categorize. Too serious for comedy, too physical for classical work, too unwilling to perform on demand. She won a trip to the Soviet Union through a left-wing student magazine and went. This was 1935. Going to the Soviet Union as a young American woman was not illegal. It was, in the climate of the period, the kind of thing that people remembered about you. Hollywood remembered it. Paramount Pictures signed her in 1936. The studio's records from this period document the initial assessment. She was talented, she was beautiful, she was also, the notes indicated, not particularly interested in being managed. This was treated as a problem to be solved rather than a quality to be accommodated. Paramount had a system for managing difficult talent. They would apply the system to Frances Farmer. The system worked like this. The studio assigned her roles without consulting her. The publicity department manufactured interviews she did not give, and relationships she did not have, and opinions she did not hold. She was photographed in situations designed to produce the image the studio wanted rather than anything connected to who she actually was. She pushed back. She was late to sets. She refused publicity appearances she had not agreed to. She contradicted studio statements in her own interviews. She was 22 years old and had been working professionally for less than a year, and she was already being discussed in studio meetings as a problem. In Hollywood in 1936, a woman who was a problem was a woman whose career could be ended. Paramount began the process of ending hers. She left Paramount in 1940 and went to New York to work in theater. She worked with the Group Theatre, one of the most serious theatrical companies in America. She was considered by her peers in New York to be genuinely exceptional. Not the kind of exceptional that studios manufactured. The kind that other serious artists recognized. She returned to Hollywood in 1941. By this time, the trajectory of her career had been substantially shaped by what Paramount had communicated to the rest of the industry. She was difficult. She was a communist. She was unstable. None of these characterizations were accurate. All of them were repeated. Between 1942 and 1944, Frances Farmer was arrested 3 times. The first arrest was for driving with expired license plates. It escalated into a charge of violating parole because of previous minor infractions. She was brought before a judge. The judge asked her occupation. She said, actor. The judge asked if she had enough money to pay a fine. She said, I work for the studio and I earn $500 a week. Does that answer your question? The judge found her in contempt of court. She was sentenced to 6 months in jail. She served part of the sentence in a psychiatric ward. In January 1944, Lillian Farmer had her daughter committed. Lillian Farmer had been in contact with the studio throughout this period. The studio had been in contact with Lillian Farmer. The precise nature of those communications is documented in studio correspondence from the period. The commitment order was signed. Frances Farmer was taken to Western State Hospital. She was 30 years old. She was not mentally ill. She was angry. And anger in a woman in Hollywood in 1944 was clinically indistinguishable from madness if the people making the clinical assessment had sufficient motivation to find her mad. At Western State Hospital, Frances Farmer spent 5 years. What happened to her there has been the subject of competing accounts for decades. Her own memoir, published in 1972, describes conditions that were barbaric. Overcrowding, physical abuse, treatments that had no clinical justification. She describes a hydrotherapy treatment in which patients were wrapped in cold, wet sheets for extended periods. She describes insulin shock therapy, in which patients were injected with insulin to induce hypoglycemic coma as a treatment for psychiatric disorders. She describes a transorbital lobotomy performed without her consent. The lobotomy claim has been disputed by medical historians who have reviewed her records. Whether it happened or not, what is not disputed is this. A woman who had committed no crime was committed to a psychiatric institution by her mother and a studio system that found her inconvenient. She spent 5 years there. When she emerged, she was not the same person who had gone in. Whatever the institution had done to her, it had done what the studio system and her mother had required it to do. Frances Farmer no longer said no. She tried to work again. She appeared in small television productions in the 1950s. She hosted a local television show in Indianapolis in the early 1960s. She gave interviews in which she was careful and controlled and said nothing that would give anyone reason to find her difficult. She was managing her own image with the precision of someone who understood exactly what happened to women whose images were managed for them. She wrote her memoir. She published it in 1972. She died of esophageal cancer in 1970, 2 years before it came out. She was 56 years old. She never read the reviews. In 1982, a film called Frances was released. Jessica Lange played Frances Farmer and was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actress. The film introduced Frances Farmer's story to a generation that had never heard it. The story it told was of a woman destroyed by a system that could not accommodate her refusal to comply. The film was a critical success. It did not win the Academy Award. Jessica Lange lost to Meryl Streep. The cruel irony at the end of Frances Farmer's story is this. The studio system that committed her to a psychiatric institution because she was difficult was trying to produce compliant, manageable, profitable stars. It produced Judy Garland, who died of a barbiturate overdose at 47. It produced Gene Tierney, who received 32 sessions of electroconvulsive therapy. It produced Frances Farmer, who spent 5 years in a psychiatric institution. The system that was designed to manage human beings was extraordinarily effective at breaking them. The films those human beings made, while the system was breaking them, are still being watched. The system that broke them is gone. Frances Farmer said no to it before almost anyone else did. She paid for it for the rest of her life. The woman who said no first is buried in Oakwood Cemetery in Raleigh, North Carolina. The people who signed the commitment order died in their beds. Did you know Frances Farmer's story before today? Tell me in the comments what you think should have happened to the people who signed that commitment order.